The impact of the electro whip sent Kieran sprawling across the blood-stained sand. His already broken ribs screamed in protest as he rolled to avoid the second strike. The azure-skinned crowd roared with delight, their multi-toned voices echoing through the vast amphitheater carved into the cliffside of Azulon Prime. Pathetic. Lord Thrazix's voice boomed through the arena's amplification system. This human specimen was supposedly a warrior on his home world. He can barely stand. Kieran forced himself to his knees, spitting blood onto the crimson sand. Through swollen eyes, he looked up at the ornate viewing box, where the Azulonian noble sat, draped in shimmering fabrics that caught the light of the twin suns. Beside Lord Thrazix sat a slender figure with downcast eyes. Lyria, his unwilling bride, her sapphire skin several shades darker than her husband's, adorned with ceremonial markings that designated her as property rather than partner. Their eyes met briefly across the distance. Something unspoken passed between them. Thrazix noticed the exchange and sneered. He rose from his seat, silencing the crowd with a raised hand. "This human was captured trespassing on sacred hunting grounds," he announced. "By our laws, his life is forfeit. But where's the entertainment in a simple execution?" The crowd murmured in agreement. "Tomorrow, he will face my champion, Graxthar, in combat." Thrazix gestured toward a muscular Azulonian warrior, standing at attention near the arena entrance, nearly 8 feet of solid muscle and aggression. And to make things interesting, a cruel smile spread across his face as he turned to Lyria. "I wager my own wife on his defeat. If this broken human somehow survives and wins, she belongs to him, to do with as he pleases." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Such a wager was unprecedented, even by Azulonian standards. Lyria's head snapped up, her luminescent eyes widening with shock, then narrowing with something that might have been hope. "My lord," one of the council elders stood, his voice wavering with concern. "This is most irregular. A royal consort is not." "She is mine to wager." Thrazix cut him off. "And the odds are overwhelmingly in my favor." He looked down at Kieran with contempt. "This human has 3 broken ribs, internal bleeding, and can barely lift a weapon. Graxthar will obliterate him within moments." Kieran locked eyes with the aristocrat and allowed himself a small, bloody smile. The guards dragged him back to his cell, throwing him roughly onto the stone floor. As the door sealed with a pneumatic hiss, Kieran carefully assessed his injuries. The medical nanites in his bloodstream, the ones his captors hadn't detected, were working overtime. But they could only do so much. A slender Azulonian female stepped into the dim light. Not Lyria, but similar in build. Her skin a paler blue, with fewer markings. "You're going to die tomorrow," she said. "You're observant," Kieran replied, wincing as he shifted to a sitting position against the wall. "And you are?" "Nalara, I serve Lady Lyria." She knelt beside him, producing a small vial from within her robes. "She sent me with this. It will help with the pain." "Why would she help me?" "Lord Thrazix won her in a political arrangement with her father. She has been unhappy. So I'm her way out?" Kieran laughed, then immediately regretted it as pain lanced through his chest. "You're her only chance." Nalara placed the vial beside him and stood. "Graxthar has killed 17 opponents in the arena. None have lasted more than 3 minutes. Good to know. My lady also wanted me to tell you that Graxthar favors his right side. An old injury never properly healed." As Nalara turned to leave, Kieran called after her. "One more thing. What weapons will I be given?" "1 ceremonial blade. Dull, most likely." "Perfect," Kieran muttered as the servant disappeared through a hidden passage in the wall. Once alone, he uncorked the vial and sniffed its contents. A mixture of local herbs and something else, a compound similar to adrenaline stabilizers used in Terran medicine. He downed it in one gulp. Almost immediately, the pain began to recede, and a clarity sharpened his thoughts. The nanites in his bloodstream would work more efficiently now. He might not be fully healed by tomorrow, but he'd be functional. And functional was all he needed to be. The crowd was larger the next day, the amphitheater packed to capacity. Word of Thrazix's unprecedented wager had spread through the city overnight. Kieran stood in the center of the arena, the sand hot beneath his bare feet. The ceremonial blade he'd been given was indeed dull, its edge barely sharp enough to cut Koth. Its balance was off too, deliberately, he suspected. Across the arena, Graxter entered to thunderous applause. The warrior was even more imposing up close, towering over Kieran by at least 2 feet, his blue skin crisscrossed with ritual scars that marked his victories. He carried a massive blade that gleamed in the sunlight, obviously well-maintained and razor-sharp. In the aristocrat's box, Thrazix lounged comfortably, sipping from a jeweled chalice. Beside him, Lyria sat rigidly, her eyes fixed on Kieran. "Citizens of Azulon Prime," Thrazix's voice boomed. "Today we witness justice served to a human trespasser. Let the combat begin." A horn sounded, and Graxter charged without hesitation. Kieran didn't move immediately. He watched the warrior's gait, noting the slight favoring of his right side that Nilara had mentioned. When Graxter swung his massive blade, Kieran ducked under it at the last possible moment, feeling the air displace above his head. The crowd gasped. Rolling across the sand, Kieran came up behind the warrior and struck quickly with his dull blade at the back of Graxter's knee. It wouldn't penetrate the thick skin, but it would stasis. Graxter roared in annoyance rather than pain and whirled around with surprising speed. His next attack was more measured, a series of calculated swings that forced Kieran to retreat. "Stand still, human," the warrior growled in heavily accented standard. "Die with honor." "Not planning on dying today," Kieran replied, circling cautiously. Graxter lunged again. This time Kieran didn't fully evade. He took a glancing blow to his shoulder, feeling the sharp edge slice through skin. But the move positioned him perfectly. He drove his blade up under Graxter's outstretched arm, into the unarmored armpit. The dull edge did little damage, but the force of the blow caused Graxter to stumble. The crowd's cheering faltered. In the aristocrat's box, Thrazix sat forward, his earlier confidence giving way to concern. Kieran pressed his advantage, moving inside Graxter's reach, where the warrior's longer arms and weapon were less effective. He struck repeatedly at vulnerable points, joints, pressure points, the old injury on the right side. Blood, dark and viscous, began to flow from small wounds. Graxter's movements grew more frantic, less controlled. "How are you still standing?" the warrior hissed during a momentary pause in their deadly dance. Kieran didn't waste breath on a response. His own wounds were taking their toll. The nanites could only do so much, and fresh blood soaked the bandages wrapped around his torso. Their blades met with a metallic clang that reverberated through the arena. Graxter's superior strength forced Kieran down to one knee. The warrior grinned, sensing victory. It was exactly what Kieran had been waiting for. With a sudden movement, he rolled sideways, causing Graxter to overextend. As the warrior stumbled forward, Kieran swept his legs. The massive Azulonian crashed to the sand. Before Graxter could recover, Kieran was on him, driving his dull blade with all his remaining strength into the warrior's throat, the one place where Azulonian skin was thin enough for his weapon to be lethal. A horrible gurgling sound escaped Graxter's lips. His limbs thrashed once, twice, then went still. The arena fell silent. Breathing heavily, Kieran pulled his blade free and stood. Blood, both his and his opponent's, covered his body. He turned slowly to face Thrazix's box. The aristocrat's face was a mask of disbelief and rage. He rose from his seat, hands gripping the balustrade so tightly that his knuckles paled to a lighter shade of blue. Beside him, Lyria's expression remained carefully neutral, but her eyes blazed with an emotion Kieran couldn't quite read. Impossible. Thrazix finally spoke, his voice carrying across the silent arena. You cheated. You must have. The human fought with the weapon provided. One of the council elders interjected. By our laws, this was a fair combat. I demand a rematch, Thrazix shouted. With whom? The elder replied calmly. Your champion is dead. The crowd began to murmur, the sound growing steadily louder. Kieran raised his bloody blade toward Thrazix. I believe you wagered something of value, my lord. Thrazix's face contorted with fury. Guards, kill this human. Stop. Lyria's voice cut through the commotion, surprising everyone, perhaps even herself. She rose to her feet, her regal bearing suddenly apparent. The wager was made before witnesses. By our most sacred laws, it must be honored. The guards hesitated, looking between their lord and the other council members. One of the eldest council members stood. Lady Lyria speaks truth. The wager was legal and binding. The human has won fairly. He turned to Thrazix. Unless you wish to challenge the outcome yourself, my lord. Thrazix glared at Kieran, then at his wife. For a moment, it seemed he might indeed issue his own challenge, but a calculating look crossed his face. Very well, he said finally. The human has won. Take her. He waved dismissively. She was becoming tiresome anyway. The casual cruelty of the statement hung in the air. Lyria's face remained impassive, but Kieran saw her hands tremble slightly. I accept my prize, Kieran announced loudly, and request safe passage from Azulan Prime, as is my right as victor. The council members conferred briefly before the eldest nodded. Granted, you will depart tomorrow at dawn. Hours later, as the twin suns of Azulan Prime began to set, Lyria entered Kieran's chamber. She stood before him, her posture perfect, her face unreadable. In the privacy of the chamber, Kieran could see details he'd missed from a distance. Her blue skin bore faint scars beneath the ceremonial markings, evidence of harsh treatment, disguised as decoration. My lady. Kieran inclined his head slightly, wincing at the pain the movement caused. You fought well, she said, her voice musical, but controlled. Better than anyone expected. I had motivation. Yes, your life. And yours. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You know nothing about me. I know you sent your servant with medicine and information about Graxthar's weakness. A brief flicker of surprise crossed her features before she composed herself again. Nalara has always been too talkative. She cares for you. And what about you, human? Do you care for me now that you've won me? There was a challenge in her voice, a bristis. Kieran met her gaze steadily. I haven't won you. I've won your freedom from him. What you do with that freedom is your choice. This time her surprise was evident. My choice? Yes. You can come with me tomorrow when I leave this planet. Or you can stay. I won't force either option. Lyria stared at him for a long moment. In 10 cycles under Azulonian law, no one has ever given me a choice. Then it's about time someone did. She moved to the window, looking out at the city below. If I stay, Thrazix will find a way to reclaim me. He cannot abide losing, especially not to a human. And if you come with me, I will be a fugitive. Thrazix has connections throughout this sector. Kieran winced as he shifted position. I'm familiar with living on the run. A commotion outside the door interrupted them. Voices raised in argument, then the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. Kieran was on his feet instantly, ignoring the pain that shot through his body. He positioned himself between Lyria and the door, his bandaged hand finding the ceremonial blade he'd kept hidden under his bedding. The door slid open to reveal Nalara, breathing heavily. Behind her lay an unconscious guard. "My lady," she gasped, "you must flee. Now." "What's happened?" Lyria demanded. "Thrazix has ordered your death, both of you. He claims the human cheated and has invalidated the wager. The council is in emergency session, but his personal guards are already on their way." Kieran cursed under his breath. So much for waiting until dawn. "There's a transport vessel in the lower hangar," Nalara continued. "I've programmed the access codes. If you leave now, you can be off-world before they realize you're gone." Lyria turned to her servant, genuine emotion breaking through her careful facade. "Come with us." Nalara shook her head. "I cannot. Someone must misdirect them." She pressed a small data chip into Lyria's hand. "Coordinates to a safe haven beyond Azulonian space. My sister dwells there. She will help you." "I won't forget this," Lyria promised. "Live free, my lady. That will be remembrance enough." They moved swiftly through the dim passageways, Nalara guiding them through service tunnels rarely used by anyone but servants. Twice they had to hide as the patrols passed nearby. As they neared the hangar level, an alarm began to sound throughout the complex. "They've discovered the guard," Nalara whispered. "Hurry!" They broke into a run, emerging onto a walkway overlooking the hangar bay. Below them, several transport vessels sat in various states of readiness. Guards were already scrambling in response to the alarm. "That one," Nalara pointed to a sleek craft near the far wall. "It's fueled and programmed for departure." Kieran scanned the hangar, noting the positions of the guards and the available cover. "We create a distraction." He moved to a control panel on the wall and studied it briefly before selecting several commands. On the far side of the hangar, a fuel container suddenly vented gas with a loud hiss. The guards rushed toward it. "Now," Kieran said. They descended to the hangar floor and moved quickly between cargo containers toward their target vessel. They were halfway there when a shout went up. "There! The prisoners!" Blaster fire erupted around them, scorching the metal containers they used for cover. "Keep going!" Kieran pushed Lyria ahead of him. "Get to the ship!" He turned, readying his blade. It would be useless against blasters, but it was all he had. To his surprise, Nalara pressed something into his hand. A small but deadly-looking blaster pistol. "For protection," she said. "Now go." Kieran nodded his thanks and continued after Lyria, firing occasional shots to keep the guards' heads down. They reached the ship as the hangar doors began to close, an automated lockdown response. Lyria slapped her palm against the access panel, entering the code Nalara had provided. The ship's entry ramp descended. Through the chaos, Kieran spotted a familiar figure entering the hangar. Thrazix himself, rage contorting his aristocratic features. Their eyes met across the distance. Thrazix raised his own ornate blaster. Kieran fired first. His shot struck the wall beside the aristocrat, sending him diving for cover. It was enough time for Kieran to reach the top of the ramp. He hit the emergency close control, and the ramp began to race. "Can you fly this thing?" he shouted to Lyria, who was already at the controls. "Better than you can fight," she replied, her fingers dancing across the console with practiced efficiency. The engines roared to life. Outside, the hangar doors were nearly closed. "We're not going to make it," Kieran said, strapping himself into the co-pilot's seat. Lyria's expression was determined. "Yes, we are." She gunned the engines, and the ship lurched forward. Guards scattered as the vessel accelerated toward the narrowing gap. Metal scraped against metal as they squeezed through the closing doors. Warning alarms blared throughout the cockpit. Then they were through, soaring into the purple-hued evening sky of Azulon Prime. "They'll send pursuit ships," Kieran warned, checking the sensors. Already on it, Lyria replied, inputting a series of commands. The ship banked sharply, diving toward the dense forest canopy that surrounded the city. They flew in tense silence for the next hour, skimming just above the forest canopy, occasionally dipping below it, when sensors indicated pursuit craft in the vicinity. As the larger of Azulon's twin suns disappeared below the horizon, they finally broke atmosphere on the planet's dark side, minimizing their heat signature against the cold void of Sais. Lyria's hands moved confidently across the navigation console, inputting the coordinates from Nalara's data chip. "Ready for hyperspace jump," she announced. Kieran checked the rear sensors one last time. "Clear behind us, for now." She engaged the hyperdrive, and the stars stretched into lines of light as they accelerated beyond normal space. Only then did Lyria's composure finally break. Her hands trembled on the controls, and she let out a shaky breath. "Are you all right?" Kieran asked quietly. She nodded, not trusting her voice immediately. When she finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "I'm free." 3 days in hyperspace gave them time to recover and plan. The ship, which they discovered was called the Twilight Drift, was better equipped than they'd initially realized. The cargo hold contained medical supplies, food rations, and even a small arsenal of weapons, suggesting Nalara had been planning this escape for some time. "We need to discuss what happens when we reach Nalara's sister," Kieran said as they shared a meal in the small galley. Lyria looked up from her food. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what's your plan? Stay with her? Find your own way?" She considered this. "I hadn't thought beyond escape." "Understandable." "What about you?" she asked. "Will you return to your Terran Frontier Corps?" Kieran shook his head. "Not possible. I was separated from my unit during a reconnaissance mission gone wrong. They likely believe I'm dead." "Then you're as adrift as I am." "Looks that way." Lyria studied him carefully. "Why did you give me a choice on Azulon? You could have claimed me as your prize, as was your right by their laws." Kieran met her gaze. "Because no person should be another's property. Even enemies? Especially enemies." He set down his utensil. "But I don't see you as an enemy, Lyria. What do you see me as then?" "A survivor. Like me." The hyperdrive alert sounded, indicating they were approaching their destination. "Preparing for re-entry to normal space," Lyria announced, hands moving across the controls. The starlines contracted back into points of light as the twilight drift decelerated. Before them hung a small, unremarkable planet, mostly ocean, with scattered archipelagos of islands. "Allura," Lyria read from the navigation data. "An independent colony world. Minimal Azulonian presence." "Good start," Kieran said, checking the sensor readings. "No other ships in orbit. Looks quiet." Lyria initiated the landing sequence, following the coordinates provided by Nalara. They descended through wispy clouds toward a small settlement nestled in a coastal valley, surrounded by dense vegetation. As they approached, Kieran noticed something odd. "No landing signals," he said. "No communication from the surface." Lyria frowned. Perhaps they were being cautious. The ship touched down on a small landing pad at the edge of the settlement. No one came out to greet them. "I don't like this," Kieran muttered, checking the blaster Nalara had given him. "Stay behind me." They descended the ramp cautiously. The air was humid, heavy with the scent of tropical vegetation and thought from the nearby ocean. Birds called in the distance, but otherwise, the settlement was eerily quiet. They moved toward the nearest structure, a low building with a domed roof. The door was partially open. Kieran pushed it wider with the barrel of his blaster, then stepped inside. The interior was in disarray, furniture overturned, possessions scattered, signs of a hasty departure, or worse. "Something's wrong," Lyria whispered. staying close behind him. They moved deeper into the settlement, finding similar scenes in each building. No bodies, but clear evidence of conflict. In what appeared to be the main community building, they found their answer. A message had been scorched into the wall. Azulonian justice comes to all who defy the natural order. 36, Lyria breathed, her voice tight with anger and fear. He found them first. But how? Kieran wondered aloud. We only just... Realization struck him. The coordinates. He must have known about Nalara's sister, been watching this place. Then they were waiting for us to arrive. Lyria turned in a slow circle, surveying the destruction. Nalara, her sister. All these people. We don't know that they're dead, Kieran said. There are no bodies. They might have been taken prisoner, or escaped. A distant rumble interrupted him. Through the building's windows they saw a ship descending through the clouds, much larger than their own, bearing Azulonian military markings. Run! Kieran shouted. They sprinted back toward the twilight drift, the sound of the approaching warship growing louder behind them. As they reached the landing pad, energy weapons fired from the Azulonian vessel, striking the ground near Bostii. Dirt and vegetation exploded around them. They scrambled up the ramp, Kieran hitting the close control as Lyria rushed to the cockpit. They're targeting our engines, she called as she activated the ship's systems. We need to lift off now. Kieran strapped himself in, as Lyria engaged the thrusters at maximum power. The ship lurched upward, narrowly avoiding another barrage of energy fire. Hold on, she warned, as she pushed the vessel into a steep climb. The Azulonian warship pursued, its superior engines allowing it to gain on them rapidly. We can't outrun them, Kieran observed grimly, checking the tactical display. And we're outgunned. We don't need to outrun them, Lyria replied, her hands flying across the controls. Just reach the upper atmosphere. Understanding dawned on Kieran. The hyperdrive. Exactly. It's risky jumping from inside a gravity well. Do you have a better idea? Energy blasts rocked the ship, warning lights flashing across the console. Shields failing, Kieran reported. One more direct hit and we're done. Lyria gritted her teeth, pushing the engines beyond their recommended limits. The ship shuddered violently as they broke through the upper atmosphere into space. Calculating emergency jump, she announced, inputting coordinates with one hand while maintaining evasive maneuvers with the other. The Azulonian warship close to firing range again. We're not going to make it, Kieran said, watching the distance between ships shrink rapidly on the tactical display. Yes, we are. Lyria's voice was steel. Jumping in 3, 2, 1. The hyperdrive engaged with a sound like tearing metal. The stars stretched, and the twilight drift lurched into hyperspace, leaving their pursuers behind. Alarms blared throughout the cockpit. The control panel sparked, and smoke began to fill the air. Hyperdrive overload, Kieran shouted over the noise. Shutting down. He reached across and hit the emergency cutoff. The ship dropped back into normal space, with a bone-jarring jolt. For several moments, they sat in stunned silence, emergency lights casting a red glow across the cockpit. Are we alive? Lyria finally asked. Kieran ran a quick systems check. Barely. Hyperdrive's completely fried. Life support functional, but damaged. We've got maybe a week of air if we're careful. And our location? He checked the navigation system, then frowned. Unknown. The emergency jump scrambled our position data. So we're stranded in an unknown region of space, with limited life support and no hyperdrive. Lyria's voice was remarkably calm. That about sums it up. She turned to look at him, a strange expression on her face. Then, to his surprise, she laughed. A genuine sound of relief, and perhaps a touch of hysteria. What's funny? He asked. We escaped Thrazix again, she said. We're lost and possibly doomed. But he didn't get us. Kieran found himself smiling, despite their dire situation. Small victories. Sometimes that's all we get. Her laughter subsided, but the tension had broken. So what now, human? Now we survive, he said simply. It's what we do. With the hyperdrive destroyed and their location unknown, they had limited options. Kieran managed to restore partial power to the sublight engines, giving them mobility within whatever system they'd found themselves in. A scan revealed they had emerged near a small planetary system. 1 sun, 3 planets, and an asteroid belt. The second planet showed atmosphere readings compatible with their physiology. It's our best chance, Kieran said, studying the sensor data. With the sublight engines, we can reach it in about 30 hours. They selected a landing site near a large body of water, surrounded by what appeared to be forest. The descent was rough, but controlled. The damaged engines potency testing, but ultimately functioning well enough to bring them down safely. The air that greeted them was cool and fresh, carrying scents of unfamiliar vegetation. The sky above was a pale lavender, dotted with wispy clouds. Around them stretched a landscape of rolling hills covered in silvery green grass. By nightfall, they had established a small camp near the ship. The temperature dropped significantly with the setting sun, and they huddled near a fire Kieran had built. We should take shifts sleeping, he suggested, until we know more about this place and its wildlife. Lyria nodded, pulling a thermal blanket tighter around her shoulders. I'll take first watch. When Kieran woke, it wasn't to Lyria's gentle shake 4 hours later, but to the sound of something large moving through the underbrush near their camp. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows across the clearing. He sat up quickly, reaching for his blaster. Lyria was already on her feet, her own weapon drawn. What is it? He whispered. I don't know, she replied. It's been circling the camp for the past hour, staying just beyond the light. A low growl emanated from the tree line. As if in response, a massive shape emerged from the shadows. It resembled a big cat, but with 6 legs and a ridge of spines along its back. Its fur was a deep indigo that seemed to absorb the firelight. Eyes that glowed amber fixed on them, with predatory inlet. Don't move, Kieran breathed. No sudden movements. The creature took another step forward, muscles rippling beneath its fur. It was easily twice the size of an earth tiger, its mouth filled with gleaming teeth. The standoff stretched for several tense heartbeats. Then, without warning, the creature lunged. Kieran fired, his shot grazing the beast's shoulder. It roared in pain and anger, but didn't slow. Lyria's shot was more accurate, striking near its eye, causing it to veer slightly off course. Instead of hitting Kieran head-on, the creature's momentum carried it past him. He felt claws rake his side as it passed, tearing through his clothing and into flesh. He spun, ignoring the pain, and fired again. This time his shot struck true, hitting the creature's flank. It howled, turning for another attack. Lyria had repositioned herself, putting the fire between her and the beast. As it prepared to lunge again, she grabbed a burning branch from the fire and thrust it toward the creature's face. The predator recoiled from the flames, hissing. For a moment, it seemed to reconsider its attack, backing away slightly. Then a sound from the forest, a high-pitched call, caught its attention. The creature's head snapped toward the sound, ears flattening against its skull. Another call, louder this time. With a final growl at Kieran and Lyria, the beast retreated into the darkness, disappearing as silently as it had appeared. Are you hurt? Lyria rushed to Kieran's side. Just a scratch, he said, though the burning pain in his side suggested otherwise. She helped him back to the fire, where the light revealed 3 deep gashes across his ribs. Lie down, she instructed, retrieving the medical kit from their supplies. As she cleaned and treated the wounds, Kieran watched her face. Her concentration was absolute, her movements gentle but efficient. "You've done this before," he observed. "Thrazix enjoyed hunting," she replied without looking up. Sometimes his prey fought back. The implication hung in the air between them. "I'm sorry," Kieran said softly. "For what?" "For what you endured." Her hands paused briefly. "I survived. As did you." She finished applying the healing gel and began wrapping bandages around his torso. "What concerns me now is what made that creature flee." "The fire." "No, the call from the forest. Something out there scared it away." Kieran frowned. "Something bigger? More dangerous? Or more intelligent?" Lyria secured the bandage and sat back. "We should return to the ship at first light. It's more defensible." Neither of them slept much for what remained of the night. They kept the fire burning high, weapons close at hand. But nothing else emerged from the darkness to threaten them. As the first light of the alien sun crested the horizon, turning the lavender sky to a pale rose, they packed up their small camp and began the trek back to the twilight drift. Halfway back to the ship, Lyria suddenly froze, holding up a hand for Kieran to stop. "What is it?" he whispered. "Listen." At first Kieran heard nothing unusual, just the rustling of leaves in the breeze and the distant calls of unfamiliar wildlife. Then he caught it, a rhythmic sound, almost like drums, he said. Lyria nodded, coming from the direction of the ship. They advanced more carefully now, using the trees for cover. As they neared the edge of the forest overlooking the clearing where they'd landed, the drumming grew louder. Crouching behind a fallen log, they peered out at the twilight drift. Surrounding the ship were dozens of figures, humanoid, but clearly not human. Their skin ranged from deep purple to pale lavender, and they stood slightly taller than an average human. Their limbs were long and graceful, their movements fluid. They wore simple clothing made from woven plant fibers and animal hides. Some carried spears tipped with what appeared to be crystalline points. Others beat drums fashioned from hollow logs, covered with stretched hide. "Indigenous population," Kieran murmured. The sensors didn't detect them. As they watched, one figure emerged from the group, taller than the others, adorned with elaborate decorations of feathers and beads. The leader, presumably. The drumming ceased as this individual approached the ship cautiously, reaching out to touch the metal hull with long six-fingered hands. "Decision time," Kieran said quietly. "Hide and hope they leave or make contact." Lyria studied the scene. "They outnumber us, significantly." "True, but if we're going to be stranded here, we might need allies." She nodded slowly. "Contact then, but cautiously." "Stay behind me," Kieran began to rise. Lyria placed a hand on his arm. "No. We approach together. As equals. It sends a better message." He looked at her for a moment, then nodded. Together. They emerged from the forest side by side, weapons holstered but accessible. As soon as they appeared, the natives spotted them. A ripple of movement went through the gathered crowd, spears raising instinctively. The leader turned, facing them directly. Now they could see the being's face, features similar to humans, but with larger, almond-shaped eyes that shimmered with an inner light, not unlike Lyria's. No nose, just two small breathing slits. The mouth was wider than a human's, with violet lips. Kieran and Lyria stopped several paces away from the group, hands held open in what they hoped would be recognized as a universal gesture of peace. "We come in peace," Kieran said, knowing his words wouldn't be understood, but hoping his tone would convey his intent. The leader tilted their head, studying the newcomers with obvious curiosity. Then, to Kieran and Lyria's surprise, the being spoke, not in any language they recognized, but in a melodic series of sounds that somehow conveyed meaning. "You from beyond Skalamai, metal bird fallen. Purpose here?" The words seemed to form directly in their minds, bypassing their ears. Lyria gasped softly. Telepathic communication. The leader stepped forward, pointing first to the ship, then to them. You make this? You control Metal Bird? Kieran nodded slowly. Yes, it's our ship. It was damaged. Understanding seemed to register in the being's large eyes. Damaged. Broken. Need fixing. Yes, Lyria confirmed. We need to repair it. The leader considered this, then made a sweeping gesture that encompassed the surrounding landscape. This place. Our home. Many cycles. You now here. Why? Not by choice, Kieran explained, unsure how much was being understood. Accident. We were being chased by enemies. At the word enemies, a murmur ran through the gathered natives. The leader's expression shifted to one of concern. Enemies follow. Bring danger here. Lyria stepped forward slightly. We don't think so. They don't know where we are. The leader studied them intently, seeming to look beyond their physical forms. Kieran felt a strange sensation, as if something was gently probing his thoughts. After a long moment, the being nodded. Truth in words. No immediate danger. The leader turned to address the gathered natives in their own language, a series of clicks, trills, and whistles that seemed impossible for human vocal cords to reproduce. The spears lowered. The tension in the clearing diminished noticeably. The leader turned back to Kieran and Lyria. We are Lirathi. I am Elonar, speaker for tribe. A six-fingered hand pressed against a chest adorned with crystalline pendants. You are? I'm Kieran, he replied, mimicking the gesture. This is Lyria. Lyria inclined her head respectfully. We are grateful for your welcome. Eleanor made a gesture that somehow conveyed both acknowledgement and invitation. Come. Our village. Food, shelter, safety. Night brings shadows. An image of the six-legged predator flashed in their minds. Night stalkers hunt dark. Kieran glanced at Lyria, who nodded slightly. We accept your invitation, he said. Thank you. For weeks, they lived among the Lirathi, learning their ways and helping where they could. The alien tribe welcomed them cautiously at first, but soon accepted them as part of the community. Kieran and Lyria settled into a routine, their relationship growing stronger as they faced the challenges of this new world together. Then one morning, the sky burned. Kieran was returning from a hunting expedition with several Lirathi. When he saw it, a streak of fire across the lavender sky, a ship entering atmosphere at high velocity. No, he breathed, dropping the game he had been carrying. Kieran ran toward the village, shouting for Lyria. He found her in the communal gardens, helping with the harvest. Ship, he gasped, pointing skyward. Coming in fast. She straightened immediately, shading her eyes to see. Azulonian? Can't tell. But it's on a direct course for this region. The newcomer was not an Azulonian military vessel, as they had feared, but a small battered transport ship of mixed design, the kind favored by mercenaries and bounty hunters. A boarding ramp had descended, and three figures were examining the twilight drift. Two humanoids in combat gear, and one Azulonian. Bounty hunters, Lyria whispered. Thrazix must have put a price on our heads. They haven't found the village yet, Kieran observed. We might still have the element of surprise. Kieran and Lyria positioned themselves where they could see the clearing clearly. The bounty hunters had forced open the twilight drift's hatch and were now inside, presumably searching for clues to their whereabouts. When they come out, Kieran murmured, we take them by surprise. Disable their ship if possible. Lyria nodded, her expression determined. They won't take us back. Several tense minutes passed. Then the bounty hunters emerged from the twilight drift, apparently having found something of interest. The Azulonian held what appeared to be a tracking device. They watched as the device was activated, emitting a faint pulse of light. The Azulonian turned slowly. The device extended before him. until it pointed directly toward the hidden observers. He's tracking us. Lyria realized with horror. Something on us is emitting a signal. Before they could react, the Azulonian shouted something to his companions, pointing toward their hiding place. The element of surprise lost, Kirin gave the signal to attack. The Lirathi hunters emerged from the forest, crystal-tipped spears poised to throw. Kirin and Lyria stood as well, weapons raised. "Surrender your weapons," Kirin called out. "You're surrounded." The bounty hunters reacted instantly, drawing blasters and firing toward the tree line. The Lirathi scattered, moving with incredible agility to avoid the energy bolts. Kirin and Lyria returned fire, forcing the bounty hunters to take cover behind their ship. "We know you're there, traitors," the Azulonian shouted. "Lord Thrazix offers a generous reward for your return, alive or dead. His preference is alive, but I'm not particular." "Tell Thrazix he'll have to do better than hired thugs," Lyria called back. "Oh, this is just the advance party, my lady," came the mocking reply. "The full contingent is on its way. We found your little hideaway planet. It was just a matter of time." Kirin exchanged an alarmed glance with Lyria. "He's bluffing," he whispered. "They can't have traced us here." Unless, Lyria's hand went to her collarbone, where the tracker had been removed months ago. What if there was a secondary tracker? Something dormant that activated later? One of the humanoids fell, a crystal spear embedded in his chest. The other returned fire wildly, hitting one of the Lirathi hunters in the leg. The Azulonian bounty hunter was more disciplined, focusing his fire on Kirin and Lyria's position. A bolt struck a tree near Kirin's head, showering him with splinters. "We need to take out their ship," he said to Lyria. "If they're telling the truth about reinforcements." She nodded, understanding. "Cover me." Before he could protest, Lyria was moving, darting from cover to cover, making her way toward the bounty hunter's vessel. Kirin laid down suppressive fire, forcing the remaining hunters to keep their heads down. The Lirathi, seeing Lyria's movement, intensified their attack from the opposite side, drawing attention away from her. She reached the ship's boarding ramp and disappeared inside. Long moments passed as the firefight continued. Kirin worried about what might be happening inside the vessel. Had there been more bounty hunters aboard that they hadn't seen? Then Lyria emerged, running at full speed. "Get back," she shouted. "It's going to blow." Everyone scattered into the forest as the bounty hunter's ship erupted in flames, the explosion sending a shockwave that flattened the surrounding vegetation. When the dust settled, one of the bounty hunters was dead, the other injured and quickly subdued by the Lirathi. The Azulonian had managed to escape into the forest during the confusion. "What did you do?" Kirin asked, as he reunited with Lyria behind a fallen tree. "Overloaded their reactor," she replied, breathing heavily. "It was easier than I expected. The safety protocols had been bypassed, probably to increase power output. The Azulonian got away." "I know. And if what they said is true about reinforcements, we don't have much time." They returned to the captured bounty hunter, who was being guarded by two Lirathi. The man glared at them defiantly despite his injuries. "Talk," Kirin demanded. "Was your friend telling the truth about reinforcements?" The bounty hunter spat on the ground. "See for yourself. They'll be here within a planetary rotation. How many ships? Enough to turn this primitive mud ball into a crater if that's what Lord Thrazix wants." Lyria stepped forward, her expression cold. "You're lying. Thrazix doesn't have the resources for a full invasion force." The bounty hunter laughed. "You've been gone a long time, lady. Your husband, ex-husband, has new friends. Powerful ones who want what this planet has." "And what is that?" Kirin asked. "Hell if I know. Some kind of rare mineral in the crust, valuable enough to finance his return to power." A discovery was made. The captured bounty hunter, in an attempt to bargain for better treatment, revealed a crucial piece of information. The tracking signal was coming from a microfilament embedded in Lyria's bloodstream. A secondary tracker Thrazix had implanted as insurance, designed to activate only after a primary tracker was removed. "Can we remove it?" Kieran asked as they consulted with the Lyrathi healers. The lead healer, an elderly female with intricate markings denoting her status, shook her head. "Too small. Too deep. Beyond our skills. Then they'll find me wherever I go." Lyria realized, her voice hollow. "I'm leading them straight to the village." "Solution exists," the healer communicated after a moment of consideration. "Ancient knowledge. Sacred pool. Change internal rivers." It took some clarification to understand what she meant. A ritual involving a mineral-rich pool in a sacred cave, said to alter the body's internal energies. The Lyrathi believed it could disrupt the tracking signal. "It's worth trying," Kieran said. "We have nothing to lose." Accompanied by the healer and Eleanor, they traveled to a remote cave system, half a day's journey from the village. Inside, they found a pool of luminescent liquid that glowed with an inner light similar to the Lyrathi's eyes. "Sacred place," Eleanor explained. "Few permitted here. Great honor." The ritual was simple but solemn. Lyria immersed herself fully in the glowing waters, which burned cold against her skin. The healer chanted in the ancient form of the Lyrathi language, invoking powers neither Kieran nor Lyria fully understood. When Lyria emerged, her blue skin seemed to shimmer with a subtle iridescence that faded after several minutes. Whether it was merely a reaction to the minerals or something more profound, they couldn't say. The bounty hunter's tracking device, when activated again, no longer responded to her presence. "It worked," Kieran said with relief. "Or changed signal. Different now. Unrecognizable to their machines. Either way, it bought them precious time." They returned to the village to continue preparations, hope renewed by this small victory. By nightfall, they were as ready as they could be. Lookouts were posted in the high trees surrounding the village. Every adult Lyrathi was armed with their traditional weapons, enhanced where possible with Kieran and Lyria's knowledge. The first ship appeared as a speck in the lavender skiffaway, growing larger as it descended. Then another. And another. 5 in total. Not the overwhelming force they had feared, but formidable nonetheless. From their observation post on a hill overlooking both the village and the direction of the twilight drift, Kieran watched through improvised binoculars. "Mercenary vessels," he reported. "Mixed designs, armed but not military grade." "How many do you estimate?" Lyria asked. "Based on ships that size, maybe 50 fighters total." Throughout the day, they watched as search parties spread out from the landing site. The escaped Azulonian bounty hunter had clearly rejoined his employers as one group headed unerringly toward the village. "They're coming," Kieran said as the lead group entered the outermost ring of traps. "It's time." The first phase of the defense began. Hidden Lyrathi triggered deadfalls and pitfalls that claimed several mercenaries. Others released caged night stalkers, the predators that had attacked Kieran and Lyria on their first night, into the path of the advancing force. The sounds of energy weapons and screams echoed through the forest. The mercenaries regrouped, more cautious now, but continued their advance. By mid-afternoon, they had fought their way through most of the outer defenses and were approaching the village itself. The Lyrathi defenders fell back to prepared positions, ready for the final stand. Kieran and Lyria positioned themselves at the village edge, blasters ready. Around them, Lyrathi hunters waited with spears, bows, and various improvised weapons. The first mercenaries emerged from the tree line, armor scorched and damaged from earlier encounters. They moved in formation, weapons sweeping the area before them. At their center walked a figure Lyria recognized instantly, despite the months that had passed. "Thrazix," she breathed. The Azulonian aristocrat had changed. His once pampered appearance had hardened. He wore combat armor rather than fine robes, and his face bore new scars. But the arrogance in his bearing remained unchanged. He raised a communication device. "I know you're here, Lyria." His voice boomed across the clearing. "You and your human pet. Show yourselves, and I might spare these primitives." Kieran and Lyria exchanged glances. "It's me he wants," she said quietly. "We face him together," Kieran replied firmly. Lyria nodded, then stood, stepping into view. Kieran rose beside her. Thrazix's face contorted with rage when he saw them standing side by side. "So the rumors are true. You've taken up with this creature." "I've chosen freedom," Lyria called back. "Something you never understood." "Freedom." Thrazix laughed harshly. "Look around you. Living like animals among savages? This is what you left me for." "Better than living as property," she replied. "Why are you here, Thrazix? Haven't you lost enough?" The aristocrat's expression darkened. "I've lost everything because of you. My title, my status, my holdings. All because you couldn't accept your place. And now you've come for revenge. I've come for what's mine." His gaze swept over the village, and for what's beneath this miserable rock. "Do you have any idea what minerals lie under your feet? Enough to buy back everything I lost and more." Kieran stepped forward. "This planet belongs to the Lirathi. You have no claim here." Thrazix sneered. "Primitive savages have no rights under Azulonian law. This world will be mine, as you should have remained." He turned to his mercenaries. "Take them. Kill any who resist." The mercenaries advanced. The Lirathi defenders tensed, ready for a Lawner's signal. Before it came, a new sound filled the air. A high, keening whistle that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The Lirathi looked up in recognition and awe. From the forest emerged dozens of night stalkers, their indigo fur bristling, amber eyes fixed on the mercenaries. But instead of attacking, they formed a line between the village and the invaders. "Guardians come," Eleanor communicated, wonder in the mental voice. Ancient pact remembered. The mercenaries halted, uncertain in the face of so many predators. "What trickery is this?" Thrazix demanded. Shoot them all." Several mercenaries raised their weapons, but before they could fire, the Night Stalkers attacked with coordinated precision that spoke of intelligence far beyond ordinary animals. The clearing erupted into chaos. Mercenaries fired wildly as massive predators tore through their ranks. The Lirathi joined the fray, their knowledge of how to fight alongside the Night Stalkers evident in their movements. Kieran and Lyria advanced toward Thrazix, who was now retreating toward the forest, surrounded by his personal guards. "He's getting away," Lyria shouted over the noise of battle. They pursued, dodging fighting mercenaries and Night Stalkers. Ahead, Thrazix disappeared into the trees. They followed, tracking him by the sound of his guards crashing through the underbrush. The forest grew denser, the light dimmer as they moved away from the village. Suddenly, the sound ceased. Kieran and Lyria slowed, moving more cautiously now. An energy bolt sizzled past Kieran's head, scorching the bark of a tree beside him. They dove for cover as more shots followed. "Did you really think I'd come unprepared?" Thrazix's voice called from somewhere ahead. "That I wouldn't be ready for you?" "It's over, Thrazix," Kieran called back. "Your mercenaries are being decimated. You've lost again." "Have I?" The aristocrat's voice was closer now. "I still have ships. I can still call for reinforcements. This is just the beginning." Lyria signaled to Kieran, pointing to movement among the trees to their right. Thrazix's guards, trying to flank them. Kieran nodded, understanding. They would need to separate. "Why can't you just let go?" Lyria called, drawing attention while Kieran slipped away to deal with the guards. "What do you hope to achieve here?" "Let go?" Thrazix laughed bitterly. You humiliated me. The noble houses whisper behind my back. The one who lost his wife to a human gladiator. The one who couldn't keep what was his. As he ranted, Kieran moved silently through the underbrush, approaching the first guard from behind. A quick strike with the hilt of his blade, and the mercenary crumpled without a sound. I was never yours, Lyria shouted back, keeping Thrazix distracted. I was sold to you by my father. A political arrangement. Nothing more. You were mine by law, by tradition. And you will be again, after I've dealt with your human. Kieran dispatched the second guard as quietly as the first, then began circling toward Thrazix's position. He defeated your champion fairly, Lyria continued. He won me according to your own laws. Laws can be rewritten by the powerful, Thrazix snarled, and I will be powerful again. Kieran spotted him finally, crouched behind a fallen log, an ornate blaster in one hand, a communication device in the other. He was alone now, his guards eliminated. Moving silently, Kieran approached from behind. But a twig snapped under his foot, alerting Thrazix. The aristocrat whirled, firing his blaster. Kieran dove sideways, the energy bolt grazing his arm. He returned fire, forcing Thrazix back into cover. Lyria, hearing the exchange, moved to flank Thrazix from the other side. The aristocrat was now caught between them. Surrender, Thrazix, Kieran called. It's over. Never. He fired wildly in both directions, keeping them at bay. I'll burn this entire forest down before I surrender to you. As if in response to his threat, a low growl emanated from the underbrush nearby. A night stalker emerged, its amber eyes fixed on Thrazix. The aristocrat's eyes widened in fear. He fired at the creature, but his shot went wide. The night stalker advanced, muscles tensing for a spring. Call it off, Thrazix shouted. Call your beast off. It's not ours to command, Lyria replied, stepping into view. This is their world, not yours or mine. The night stalker paused, as if considering her words. Then, to everyone's surprise, it sat back on its haunches, watching Thrazix, with predatory intensity, but making no move to attack. Kieran emerged from cover as well, his blaster trained on the aristocrat. Last chance, Thrazix. Surrender. For a moment, it seemed the Azulonian might comply. His shoulders slumped, his blaster lowered slightly. Then, with a sudden movement, he raised his communication device. Orbital strike on my position, he shouted into it. Burn it all. Kieran fired, the energy bolt striking Thrazix's hand, sending the device flying. The aristocrat howled in pain, dropping his blaster as well. Lyria rushed forward, kicking the weapons away from his reach. You would destroy everything, even yourself. Better than letting you win again, Thrazix spat, clutching his injured hand. The night stalker growled, rising to its feet again. It's not about winning, Kieran said, approaching cautiously. It's about freedom, choice, things you never understood. Thrazix looked between them, hatred burning in his eyes. Kill me then. Get it over with. No, Lyria said quietly. Death would be too easy. She turned to the night stalker, meeting its amber gaze. Something passed between them, an understanding that transcended species. The creature moved forward, circling Thrazix slowly. The aristocrat flinched, expecting an attack. Instead, the night stalker nudged him roughly toward the deeper forest. What's happening? Thrazix demanded, fear creeping into his voice. Justice, came Elinar's mental voice as the Lirathi leader emerged from the trees. Our way. What does that mean? Thrazix looked wildly between them. What are you doing to me? Kieran understood first. Exile, he said. They're sending you into the wilderness, Alton. You can't do this. Thrazix tried to back away, but the night stalker was behind him, teeth bared. I'll die out there. That depends on you, Lyria replied, on whether you can adapt, learn, change. More Night Stalkers appeared, forming a half-circle that left Thrazik's only one direction to move, deeper into the unknown forest. The aristocrat looked at Lyria one last time, his expression a mixture of hatred and disbelief. This isn't over, he said. I'll find my way back. I'll make you pay. Goodbye, Thrazik's, she replied simply. The Night Stalkers advanced, herding him away. His protests faded as he disappeared into the forest, leaving only signs behind. Kieran moved to Lyria's side, taking her hand. Are you all right? She nodded slowly. Yes, I think I am. Battle won, Eleanor communicated. Mercenaries surrender or flee, ships remain. What will you do with them? Kieran asked. Some stay. Learn our ways. Others leave, never return. Your choice same. Kieran and Lyria exchanged glances, understanding the offer being extended. The ships, Lyria said. We could leave, go anywhere. We could, Kieran agreed, if that's what you want. She looked around at the forest that had become their home, at Eleanor, who had become their friend, at the life they had built together. What I want, she said softly, is to stay here, with you. Kieran smiled, drawing her close. Then that's what we'll do. They returned to the village hand in hand, leaving behind the darkness of their past and stepping into the future they had chosen together.